Donald Trump was back in New York for opening statements in his election interference hush money criminal trial, and the day moved swiftly and dramatically. Prosecutors laid out the details of Trump's alleged crimes, stating plainly, quote, "This case is about criminal conspiracy." They detailed Donald Trump's relationship with his ex-fixer Michael Cohen and their alleged conspiracy, which the prosecutors say they pulled off with the help of the National Enquirer, to purchase and bury salacious stories about Donald Trump leading up to the 2016 election. It's a practice known as catch and kill. Prosecutors alleging they, quote, agreed to cook the books to repay Michael Cohen for the hush money payouts. They called it all, quote, an illegal conspiracy to undermine the integrity of a presidential election. Donald Trump's defense emphasized its client's innocence in their opening statement. They started with this, quote, President Trump did not commit any crimes. You will find that he is not guilty. The prosecution then called its first witness, David Pecker, CEO of the National Enquirer's publisher, American Media, Inc., and a longtime Trump ally, whom the prosecution called a co-conspirator in the hush money plots. David Pecker, in his brief testimony today, admitted that the National Enquirer used what he called checkbook journalism, often paying for their scoops. Pecker's testimony will resume tomorrow morning. Joining our coverage, MSNBC host Katie Phang. She was in the courtroom for us all day. Andrew Weissmann is here, former FBI General Counsel and MSNBC legal analyst. Neal Katyal is here, former U.S. Acting Solicitor General and an MSNBC legal analyst. Katie Phang, I start with you. We've talked about the National Enquirer.
Yes.
We've talked about the context of when the stories were caught and killed in the aftermath of Access Hollywood. I still can't get over the fact that the first thing the jury heard today was a transcript, not the tape, of the Access Hollywood.
And I will tell you, sitting there, that you would think that the most powerful way to convey that language would have been hearing Donald Trump's own voice saying those words. And yet it was still startling as you're sitting in this dingy but still official courtroom to have the prosecutor get up and say those words, to use that language.
And they weren't edited the way we do them for TV?
Not edited, in full, I was going to say full something else, but you're not allowed to. But and the effect and the impact was exactly as it was intended. Because one, we don't speak. Right. We don't do it's just gym talk kind of stuff, number one. And number two, to have it be done, though, in the context of the bigger picture of the story that was being told by the prosecution made sense. It was yet another example of how Donald Trump, in his misogyny and his just grossness, he was so desperate to hide that and to try to do the damage control that he would pay to make sure that people didn't talk.
It seems like a lot of the analysis is around jury selection and around these hearings about what evidence will be admitted. It seems like this was really consequential, having this admitted, the transcript.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is the motive evidence. I mean, this is something that's really necessary to prove up what the scheme was, because I think we're going to hear about inside the campaign just how this was a frenzy. And so they needed to do something to prevent more damaging information from coming out. So clear motive evidence. And I agree with Katie, like, you know, in a courtroom, no matter how dingy, no matter where it is, there's a solemnity to it. And these jurors, having just gone through that process, having taken an oath, that hearing that sort of coarseness, to me, one of the things that I sort of took away was I was very curious about how Todd Blanche was going to open. And one of the things he said about Michael Cohen, which is in such contrast to that tape, the transcript, was, unbeknownst to Donald Trump, his lawyer, Michael Cohen, turned out to be a criminal. Is there anyone sitting, like, I know the three of us don't, but I mean, really, he just said he wants to bring Paul Manafort back on the campaign, who is a convicted criminal. He had Roger Stone. He is Steve Bannon. I mean, the litany of people, the idea that he's going to portray himself as some upstanding guy. And unbeknownst to him, Michael Cohen was doing all this behind his back.
Yeah, I think in fashion they call that an interesting choice. Along with America, I want to make sure that there's something hot and some honey and some lemon.
There is.
In your
there
cup.
is.
I hope that you feel better. We need you. You can't go down on us. Neal Katyal, tell me what you make of David Pecker as a first witness.
So I think it made sense to start with him because he was describing what he called the checkbook journalism model. And I don't think that that's going to be the most concerning thing we'll hear from Pecker in the following days about checkbook journalism. I mean, I suspect the National Enquirer isn't exactly a beacon of ethical journalistic behavior. And what was described already, just Nicolle, in the first part of the trial was that basically a catch and kill scheme, which everyone, if you're running for office or if you're a prominent person, we'd all love to have a catch and kill scheme. I mean, Biden could do it and kill stories about his son. Clinton could do it for Lewinsky and the like. So what I found today with Pecker was a real relationship between the hush money part of the case and the motive and what Trump was doing out of it. So that was one thing that I was really struck by. The other, just to return to Andrew's point about the opening statements, I was shocked by Blanche's argument, Trump's lawyer's argument on the law, in which he said, look, I have a spoiler alert. There's nothing wrong with trying to influence an election. It's called democracy. I mean, that is just thoroughly bizarre because the question, of course, under the law is how you influence an election. I mean, if I bribe people $1 million to vote for me, it's certainly influencing an election, but it's obviously illegal. And so, the question is how it's done here by doing it with these kind of payments through his lawyer that are mischaracterized. I mean, I think Trump's lawyers really have their work cut out for them.
Well, I thought it was an interesting choice, right? I mean, so, Neal, I'm not a lawyer, but I thought that when Rudy Giuliani went on Sean Hannity and described the funneling, I mean, funneling is never associated with a legal financial scheme, typically, at least in the movies. But when Rudy Giuliani goes on Sean Hannity and describes the funneling of funds from Donald Trump through Michael Cohen for these expenses, he sort of told half the story. And then I thought Blanche made clear that this isn't terrain he can avoid. And so it felt like a political argument saying we're going to debate what the definition of a crime is. We're not going to defend on the facts. Does that suggest there's some weakness on the facts side for them?
Oh, yeah. And I think I'm going to quote from the great Katie Phang on this. I mean, lawyers, and we all know hundreds and thousands of lawyers. No lawyer takes out a home equity loan to go and pay for, a client's payments to some person. Like that just literally never happens. And it's so suspicious. And the claim that Trump's lawyer is trying to make here is that Cohen did it on his own. I mean, color me silly, but that's just not at all plausible. And so I do think that they've really got the spaghetti strategy going of just anything, a bogus claim about the law, a bogus claim about the facts that works on TV, doesn't work in a regular court of law, the kind of court that Andrew and Katie were describing with its solemn procedures and an impaneled jury that's sworn to listen to all the evidence.
Well, Rachel's not here, so I'll say this thing that she said makes her ears blush. I mean, a jury isn't going to have the legal sophistication that the three of you have, but they'll have the common sense that we all have. And, he sort of seemed to impugn Stormy Daniels as well. And if you're Trump's lawyer and you're impugning Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels, I mean, Michael Cohen didn't have the sex with Karen McDougal or Stormy Daniels. Michael Cohen didn't benefit from the alleged sex staying secret. Michael Cohen also spent his money and went to jail because of it. I mean, there's a common sense gut check that seems to have already caught up with the story that they were trying to tell in their opening statement.
Yeah, and the prosecution was so clear and clean. And they said it was 3 specific catch and kill schemes that Trump was directly involved in that benefited him for purposes of influencing the outcome of the 2016 election. So there's no one-off here. This wasn't an accident. Trump didn't accidentally have sex with Stormy Daniels and accidentally pay her off and accidentally have these things happen, because you see that Dino the doorman got paid off. You see Karen McDougal got paid off. And the cast of characters never changes. The common denominator is always Michael Cohen as the fixer, with David Pecker fixing the public face of all of this and Donald Trump paying it all off, right? And so I think what was important is that there are some of us that are exceptionally jaded, having gone through this for years, going on this wild ride that is the Donald Trump experience. And we're all in this courtroom and we're listening to all of this, and yet we're still stunned when we hear Todd Blanche get up, who, by the way, to Neal's point, the spaghetti theory, we've heard this as lawyers, as trial lawyers. You just throw anything on the wall and hope something sticks. Because really, you just want to create reasonable doubt, right? If you create it somehow, who cares how it managed to happen? But that's how he did. Blanche is kind of like meandering. He got up and he's like, oh, yeah, and we're going to talk about this now. Oh, yeah, we're going to talk about this now. It just didn't seem like there was any type of organized flow. And he only used 35 minutes when he could have used more. And I think he just kind of got to the point where he kind of ran out of steam and he's like, OK, well, we're just going to sit down now.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.